Hello all, hope you're doing well today. So this question of who cares if you become a minority in your own country has reared its head in the mainstream again. And it's always interesting when this happens because you get to hear the counter side's views on it, and I must say, their arguments seem quite flimsy, if you ask me. Now, we're starting with Piers Morgan. This all erupted because he had a conversation with Tucker Carlson, who's obviously concerned about demographic decline, not just in the UK, but across the Western world. And Morgan is something of a shapeshifter himself. You know, he takes many different roles. You have to remember, he's a pure individualist, cutting-edge, self-centered moron from the private school system into the tabloid world. So he's only ever out for himself. And that's why in this clip he's taking the role of the Blairite. Modern London's absolutely fantastic, don't you know? Who cares if we become a minority in our own country? Are you some sort of racist? All it will mean is we have exactly what we have now, only more equality and better food.
Well, I don't see an English country. So we're in the city of London now.
What do you mean there? What do you mean by that?
It's not... Well, people whose ancestors built Stonehenge are not here anymore. So the city of London is 36% white, and that's happened in the last, 40 years.
But England is about 70% white.
England.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it was 99% in 1945.
Okay, so we've evolved.
But you're on the way to becoming the minority in the country. So no one wants to say that. I think you can get arrested for saying that here.
Well, no,
that's not white supremacy. This is the indigenous population of the country.
Well, it's a statistical fact that I think by 2100, we will be a minority white country.
2063 as of today.
Well, I've read a bit later.
But these are dynamic numbers, so they change.
Yeah, but here's my question for you. So what?
Well, let me refer to the beginning of our conversation when you said that the people who live in a country define the character of that country. And then you said, yes, all the things for which we were famous and in which we had pride, like our stoicism, our concern for others, our tidiness, the cleanest country in the world now, it's pretty filthy. All those things change when you get new people moving there. You said that. I mean, you're the racist, not me. So I'm just using the parameters that you set. I
did not say that was down to
white
people coming to the country.
Now, I think we've seen enough of this to get the picture as what's going on here. Tucker Carlson's pushing for the admission from Morgan that mass immigration has fundamentally changed Britain, and Morgan just refuses to give it. You know, he'll tiptoe around the edges about the state of modern Britain, but he knows, he wants the money, he knows where his bread's buttered and so on, so he just won't say it. He'll go back to, socio-economic issues and then call you a racist. Now, as you might imagine, Morgan's statements went down like a lead balloon on right-wing Twitter, many people repeating them, making content about it, stating how Piers Morgan is a perfect example of the establishment stooge that will see the demographic replacement of the native people. And Morgan, in typical fashion, came back at this by making sort of edgy jokes such as, there are a lot of white English people I would happily trade for a good weekly chicken tikka masala. Now remember, Piers Morgan is an expert at winding you up here and creating drama. There's no need to get invested in it. All he wants to do is create a massive fuss because to him that means ratings, that means dollar signs in his eyes and more money in Piers's bank account. In a sense, Piers Morgan is the perfect example of the Frankenstein that modernist Western man has become. Completely rootless, completely focused on his own celebrity and his own income. Notions such as tradition, heritage, the spirit of your group, these things don't mean anything to someone like Piers Morgan. They're simply empty words that don't make him any money. Piers is also an expert at walking the line of controversy without crossing it, again, not to upset his paymasters. That's why when we see him on his show, he's hosting a conversation between this leftist, I think he's called Ollie Dugmore, and Konstantin Kisin, who's what, I guess you could say, Civ-Nat centre-right, something like that. And it's clear by Morgan's earlier statements that he'd be basically edging towards what Dugmore states here.
I think this idea that your sort of culture, your national identity, can potentially be diluted by people of a different skin tone or indeed religious background is a pretty pathetic argument. It's a patriotism that's grounded in weakness and fragility. My patriotism is grounded in strength. I believe the ideas of English national identity, British national identity are pretty strong, and I'm not that worried about people that come to the UK with a different idea.
It's very interesting, this clip, because we see Dugmore utilise a classic left-wing rhetorical tactic. I often say on the channel, try and stay calm when you view these things. I know it's not easy, I'm not perfect at it myself. But if you are calm, you will see how they're trying to make you angry so they can emotionally manipulate you. In honesty, the whole of Morgan's show is designed to emotionally manipulate you. It almost always descends into screaming and shouting. It's not really about ideas and honest exchanges. But we see in Dugmore, he states this notion that you're somehow weak and pathetic if you're concerned about people coming over here en masse from different countries, from different ethnic backgrounds, from different religions and so on. Patriotism of weakness and fragility is the exact phrase that Dugmore used, sorry. But again, the implication here is that if you hold to that concern, you're insecure, your mind is all twisted and dark, and you're full of shadow energies like anger and fear and panic and doubt. Now, if you've been twisted and contorted through the leftist education system like I used to hold to some of this nonsense when I was a very, very young man, you'll know that this is classic leftist technique. The idea number one is to make out that you are somehow well integrated as an individual, kind, tolerant, well put together, more grounded. And that, of course, is a propaganda tool to those who have any insecurity inside of themselves to say, come to our ideology. If you adopt it, you'll be safe. This dynamic may well explain why there are higher mental health problems among leftist liberals. Many of them adopt the ideology, believing it's kind, believing it's a safe haven, but don't know it's just an ideology. It's not going to solve the woes of your soul. And that's why when you break down what Dugmore is actually saying, it's just a castle built on sand. All he's saying is, my ideology is strong and great, and you're weak and pathetic for having yours, which is just schoolyard insults. It's no different from the, I'm a strong independent woman, and you're a toxic male if you can't accept that. And that's just it. The rhetoric that Dugmore is using here is no different to the radical feminists when you say, I believe in traditional values where the man is the head of the family. They just can't believe you can think this is because it leads to a harmonious family environment, that it's what the male and female soul craves deep down, that it leads to an expression of love over time. No. You only think that because you're twisted and disgusting and insecure. You really need to be led by a woman to show you're a real man and go to the Pride March and dance around with a bunch of gay dudes to show you're secure in your sexuality. I've never understood that one. I've never had any desire to dance with a gay dude, and nor would I ever, and I've only ever been interested in women, and it's never changed. I don't understand their point. But anyway, back to the key point. Dugmore's point is essentially the same old thing, being British is about liberal values and the rest of it, to which Konstantin Kisim interrupts him and says, well, what about Muslims who believe in Sharia law then? And this is where the show gets annoying, because Dugmore's point essentially becomes it's only a problem if they're trying to stage an insurrection, which ignores the core point. If they don't hold the liberal values that you have to be, quote, British, then how are they British? But of course it runs a lot deeper than that, and you never really get this on shows like Piers Morgan's. My point is, what about people like me? There are many of us in the country. I've done one of these DNA tests and I'm basically Anglo-Norman. I've got some Celtic, which is the pre-Anglo grouping of Brythonics and so on. On top of that, I've got a tiny smidgen of Scandinavian, which I'd assume is from the Vikings. So basically, I'm a pastiche of English history. But I don't believe in liberal values. I think they're spiritually, socially and civilizationally corrosive. So where does that put people like me in Dugmore's conception of Englishness and Britishness? Let's say you have a Kurd who's an atheist, who embraces liberal secular values and is desperate to move to Britain. He gets here, he's been here 2 weeks. He's got the right British values. So in Dugmore's conception, that Kurd is more English or more British than me. You can see the innate absurdity of this position, and because my conception of national identity is rooted in ethnicity, I don't know why that's so controversial. We understand it with the Palestinians and the Maoris and so on, but it is. It means that people like David Lammy state that I'm the far right who needs to integrate into modern Britain, and he himself is only, second generation British? So in essence, we're in this absurd Kafkaesque reality in which people who've been here 5 minutes are lecturing people whose ancestry goes back thousands of years here about how they're not English and they need to integrate. And to rub salt in the wound, they do so with a smug grin on their face, calling you weak, pathetic and fragile. Dear Lord. So I thought I might end this video with a brief explanation as to why becoming a minority in your own country is a bad thing. I'm sure some of you are rolling your eyes at this point, why do you need an explanation? It's obvious, but you have to remember many people are heavily indoctrinated and it helps to work this stuff through mentally. The first major issue here is the liberal assumption that human beings are just interchangeable units. It doesn't really matter what your background is, what you believe, as long as all of that is subordinate to the liberal ideology, to the regime of the age. This, of course, is the worldview that Dugmore foundations his ideology upon. The problem is, of course, as we explore all the time on this channel, human beings and reality is deeper than human ideologies. Ideologies are just fragmented reflections of reality. They're political models that help order society. They don't go as deep as the non-rational elements, things such as spirit, things such as tradition, things such as family, kin, in-group preference, even love. Now, with mass propaganda campaigns and the excitement and hedonism of the market, as well as if the demographic figures are low enough, you can kind of ignore these broader underlying forces. But we've hit the point now in modern Britain and across the modern West where we've got past that critical mass and you can no longer ignore that there are fundamental differences between groups. Now, as we know all too well, even recognising differences between different groups is seen as highly suspicious by the liberal regime, seen as hatred, if you will, because you're undermining the fundamental blank slatism of the liberal ideology. Of course, it's not actually hatred in and of itself, it's a neutral observation properly understood. I'm sure some people have used it for hateful means, but properly understood, it's a neutral observation that we all belong to distinct spiritual, ethnic and cultural lineages that have worked over hundreds of years to develop the uniqueness of a given people and how they live. And this is why many of us feel that modern liberal multiculturalism is actually quite inhumane and cruel, and that it rips apart the heart and soul of individuals and groups. It demands that you jettison everything that gives your life true coordination and replace that with the will of the market and liberal ideology. It's this ideology that's led to Homo economicus, the material mass man, modern nihilism and the age of insecurity. We don't know who we are anymore, and we can see the West is falling via its very foundations. This is why I don't begrudge Muslims for holding on to their tradition. I'm not some liberal who expects them to come here and adopt a Blairite ideology. They have an old tradition of their own. In essence, the fundamental problem is when you bring in all sorts of different peoples and traditions from around the world, you're going to need an increasingly tyrannical and censorious state, as we're already witnessing in modern Britain, to keep everybody in line. That's why through the traditionalist frame, you can deeply respect other traditions, have friends from other traditions, learn from other traditions, but you understand we have sacred lineages that need their own geographical and cultural space in order to flourish. I mean, even the Dalai Lama said that Europe belongs to the Europeans and got in trouble for it. Do you really think the Dalai Lama says that because he's full of hate? Of course he's not. The reason he says these sorts of things is because he understands spiritual lineage and says it from a prism of spiritual harmony in the global context. It's why he can often see through the quote-unquote refugee crisis. Now, of course, what I've offered here is a sort of philosophical, traditionalist, spiritual case as to why demographically replacing the Europeans is a bad idea. But of course, there's a much more pressing and political case on the ground for it. Now, what I'm talking to here is the violence, the danger, the sex attacks. Now, the state will call you evil if you notice these things, make out you're the problem, you're just picking on them because you're evil and racist, but it's getting harder and harder to deny that this is a very real problem. Many people are putting the pieces together and realising, well, look, if things are getting bad already with regards to the violence and the air of danger, the feeling of alienation, how is it going to get any better when we keep importing more and more people as our birth rates go down and down, when the mainstream is telling them that white people are evil, that they've got privilege, that everything wrong in your life is because of them? You're justified in being angry with them. Is that really a recipe for harmony and success, by acknowledging our own toxic whiteness and throwing it in the bin and embracing the rest of the world and its whole universal identity? Do we really think that that's going to lead to a better tomorrow? Or is it going to lead to a very dangerous, chaotic dystopia? Now, I'm sure the Piers Morgans and Ollie Dugmores of the world will tell people like me that I'm just stupid and evil and full of fear, and the solution is just to jettison your whiteness and chow down on some curry and it will all be okay. Personally, I don't think they're right. I don't think they're right at all. I think they're superimposing their sheltered leftist liberal ideology onto the rest of the world in an effort to make themselves feel secure. But of course, they're putting themselves and the rest of us in quite deep jeopardy. Now, personally, I don't believe there are any political solutions to this. There are just too many warring factions of ideology, and the liberal regime just has everything completely locked down. But there is a silver lining to all of this, and that's that in life we often have to learn that ideology gets overruled by, again, the harsher realities of life, and in this case, pain. Like a man who believes he can fly, eventually he will jump off some 10-foot rock and fall flat on the floor. The pain will break through all of his ideological presuppositions. And it seems to me that's what the Western world is going through at the moment. And until we hit that rock bottom, we can truly realise the deeper realities of life, which aren't rooted in hatred or being nasty to anybody. These are just fundamental sacred orders that have given birth to civilizations and maintained them over the years. Until we reconnect with that, we're going to keep experiencing decline and trouble. As always, these are my thoughts. Do let me know what you think down below. If you want to join the sister channel on spiritual and personal transformation, that's in the description. As is the Substack if you want exclusive content, join the monthly calls and the rest of it. Big plans for 2026 with that. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your day, friends, and do subscribe to this channel if you're new.